You know, in my 30 years on the bench, I thought I'd seen it all. Drug dealers, con artists, deadbeat parents, you name it, they've stood before me. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for the day William Sharp walked into my courtroom fighting his estranged wife over a video game console, a PlayStation. Not a house, not a car, not even custody of their 5-year-old son, a toy. And let me tell you something, by the time this case was over, I realized this wasn't about a PlayStation at all. This was about pride, betrayal, and two adults who'd completely lost sight of the one person who mattered, their little boy, Michael. Buckle up, because this story is a mess from start to finish. The moment they walked in, I knew this was going to be interesting. On one side stood William Sharp, computer technician, confident, standing there like he had right on his side. Next to him, his girlfriend, Martha Pennington. Yeah, you heard that right. The girlfriend was the plaintiff in this case. And on the other side, Betty Sharp, William's wife. Technically still his wife, mind you. She stood there with fire in her eyes and a story to tell. Now, before we get into the meat of this disaster, let me paint you the picture of how we even got here. I started with Martha. Sweet girl, or so she seemed. She tells me she met William about a year before moving in with him. He told her he was separated from his wife, that classic line, right? Oh, we're separated. It's complicated. We're only still married for the medical benefits. Sure, buddy. I've heard that one 1,000 times. Martha believed him. She moved into his house, made herself comfortable, and even knew about Betty and little Michael living up in Northern California. But here's where it gets interesting. Martha claims she never actually met Betty. Why? Because every time Betty came down to visit, about 4 times a year, Martha would pack up and leave the house. Think about that. This woman was living with a man whose wife would show up periodically, and she'd just disappear, like some kind of mistress in a bad soap opera. Where did you go when she came down? I asked her. I'd just leave, Martha said, like this was the most normal arrangement in the world. And then there were the holidays. William would pack up and drive to Northern California to visit his son. Martha stayed behind, waiting patiently like a good little girlfriend. Now, during all this domestic bliss, Martha decided to buy a PlayStation, video game console, for those of you not keeping up with technology. She bought it with her own cash, or so she claims, around $250 worth of equipment. She says she bought it for herself and William to play with and for little Michael to enjoy when he came to visit his father. Sweet gesture, right? Except here's the problem, all the receipts, they had William's name on them, not hers. I paid cash, Martha insisted. I just had them put it under his name in the computer because I'd never shopped there before. Convenient, very convenient. Then it was Betty's turn to speak, and let me tell you, this woman had a completely different story. According to Betty, she and William were not separated, not in 1994, not ever, at least not until recently. She was up in Northern California attending cosmetology school. An arrangement, she says, William himself suggested. Tell me how you decided to go up to Northern California, I asked her. Betty's voice cracked with emotion. That's my husband's idea. He said to me, honey, we cannot live on one income. We cannot buy a house and a second car for you. Go up where your parents are. Take Michael, go to school. It'll take 8 months, and when you come back, we'll have a better life. I'll buy you a car. We'll move into a bigger house. She paused, fighting back tears. He planned the whole thing. He just wanted me out of the way so he could cheat on me. Now, according to Betty, she'd come down every 2 or 3 weeks to visit her husband. And guess what? The girlfriend was never there during those visits. Funny how that works, isn't it? Betty told me that William had called her one night while she was up north. Honey, he'd said, I bought a video game for Michael. Don't tell him. I want it to be a surprise when he comes back next week. In Betty's mind, her husband bought that PlayStation for their son, period. Then she graduated from cosmetology school 8 months later and came home. That's when everything fell apart. I came back to the house, Betty explained. My stuff was still there. Everything still belonged to me. But I started getting phone calls. Someone would call and hang up. I kept asking William, are you cheating on me? And he kept saying no. The truth came out eventually, as it always does. The phone calls, the suspicious behavior, the girlfriend living in their home, it all came crashing down. But wait, it gets worse. On October 1st, 1997, Betty left the house for good, but not because of the cheating. Oh no, she left because, according to her, William beat her up and choked her. The police came. She'd finally had enough. As she was leaving, little Michael asked his father if he could take the video game with him. His father said, oh yes, baby, you can have the video game. Betty told me. He never mentioned this girl purchased it for Michael. So Betty took the PlayStation, moved back in with her parents, and filed for divorce in November 1997. That's when Martha decided to sue her for $250 to get the PlayStation back. Now it was William's turn to explain himself, and boy did he have a story. We separated back in 1994, William claimed confidently. She moved out, took her stuff in a U-Haul to her parents' house. That's when the first filing for separation was. I stopped him right there. So you got back together again? No, he stammered. We didn't finish the divorce proceedings. I just extended medical benefits to her and my son. Right, so according to William, Betty hadn't lived there in years. She only came down occasionally for dental appointments and doctor visits because she was still on his insurance. Very generous of him. Did your son play with the PlayStation? I asked. Yes, while he was down, William admitted. Now here's where William really tried to paint himself as the victim. He claimed Betty was running up his charge cards, hiding communal debt, and basically bleeding him dry financially. He was already under court order to pay her $1,300 a month in spousal support as of November 1997. We're talking principal here, Your Honor, William said, puffing out his chest. I cut him off real quick. No, I'm talking about father here. You're talking about principal. I'm talking about father. As I dug deeper into the paperwork they'd brought me, things got even more interesting. I found court documents showing William Oscar Sharp had been convicted of something back in September 1994. The violation date matched right around when Betty supposedly moved to Northern California. Were you convicted of domestic violence in 1994? I asked him directly. No, Your Honor, William said, but his girlfriend Martha muttered yes. Not to my knowledge, William backpedaled. I never appeared in front of anybody. I was never in court. I was never served papers. I held up the court documents. You don't know anything about these papers, including directions for you to take certain medical testing? William squirmed. Finally, he admitted. Solicitation. I got arrested for solicitation and had to get tested for HIV. With her not being in the house for months at a time, I'm sorry, I went out and strayed. The courtroom went silent. Then someone in the gallery laughed nervously. This man was on probation for 3 years for solicitation, meaning he'd been arrested for trying to pay for sex, and he had the audacity to stand in my courtroom fighting over a toy. But William wasn't done. He started ranting about how Betty would hit her head on the wall and pound on door jambs to make it look like he was abusing her. He claimed she'd throw cell phones and TV remotes at him. How many times did she hit her head on the wall? William actually asked Betty like she was going to incriminate herself. I'd had enough. Mr. Sharp, you think that this lady, if she lied to you about everything else, is going to answer honestly about how many times she hit her head against the wall? Even Betty had to admit, point well made, Your Honor. I looked at William Sharp and asked him the only question that mattered. Mr. Sharp, are you prepared to say to your son, what's your son's name? Michael. Michael. Are you prepared to say to Michael, you have to give me back the PlayStation that's at your house? Are you prepared to look him in the eye and tell him, Mommy is going to pack up the PlayStation and it's going to be returned to my house because it belongs to me and I will keep it in my house and let you play with it when you come to my house? Are you prepared to say that to your son? William didn't even hesitate. Yes, Your Honor, I am. That's when I knew exactly what kind of person I was dealing with. Look, I'm going to be honest with you, and I told him this right there in the courtroom. I believed most of William's story. I thought Betty was quite frankly full of baloney about a lot of things. The evidence suggested she hadn't been living in that house for a while. She came back for medical treatments, for visits, because she had William's insurance. Her own sworn papers showed incidents of domestic violence in 1994 and 1995, which lined up with when she supposedly left. There was only one recent incident in 1997, after which she filed for divorce again. So yeah, Betty wasn't exactly Snow White in this story. But here's the thing, and this is what I tried to make William understand. None of that mattered. Mr. Sharp, I told him, Michael is the innocent here. He's the innocent. And if he's got, according to you, a miserable, conniving mother, if somebody's going to set an example for him, it's going to have to be his father, right? William started to speak, but I cut him off. Why don't you just listen? I continued. He's not going to understand that your girlfriend bought the PlayStation and now you want it back. 5-year-olds don't understand that, Mr. Sharp. The bottom line is that he will know his toy was taken away because his daddy wanted to give it to his girlfriend because that's what she's going to tell him. And I can't prevent that. Is that what you want? William and Martha both started protesting. Betty jumped in too, saying she wasn't going to give the PlayStation back, that it belonged to her son. Shut up. I had to bang my gavel to restore order. I looked at both of them. William and Betty, two adults who'd created this innocent child together and were now using him as a pawn in their bitter, ugly divorce. I think you two people have already done enough damage, I told them. I don't think either one of you are operating in your son's best interest. Quite frankly, I really don't. I explained my reasoning. I do believe the video game was purchased to keep in his house while the child was there visiting with him, because that's what fathers do. That's what non-custodial fathers do. They buy these lovely games for the kids so the kids have a good time when they come to their house, not buy it and give it to you to take to your house so he has a good time in your house. That's just not the way things work. It's common sense. But at the end of the day, that 5-year-old boy had the PlayStation at his mother's house. He was playing with it. It was his toy in his mind, taking it away from him because daddy's girlfriend wanted to prove a point. That wasn't justice. That was cruelty. I'm awarding you $250. I told Martha, consider yourselves lucky. That's all. Martha got her money. William got to feel like he'd won his precious principal. And Betty got to keep the PlayStation for Michael. But you know who really lost? That little boy. Because he had two parents who were more interested in hurting each other than protecting him. As they filed out of my courtroom, I sat back in my chair and thought about Michael. Somewhere in Northern California, there was a 5-year-old kid playing video games, completely unaware that his parents had just dragged his favorite toy through a courtroom battle. That PlayStation probably cost $250. You know what's priceless? A childhood free from your parents' drama. William Sharp and Betty Sharp couldn't give Michael that. They were too busy fighting over who was right, who was wronged, who deserved what. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why I still wake up some mornings and think about cases like this one. Because 30 years on the bench taught me one thing. The law can force people to pay money, return property, and follow court orders. But the law can't force people to be decent human beings. William Sharp was willing to look his 5-year-old son in the eye and take away his toy to prove a point. That tells you everything you need to know about what kind of father he was. Betty Sharp may have been manipulative, may have stretched the truth, may have been playing games with William's finances, but when her son asked for that PlayStation, she let him have it. Sometimes in my courtroom, nobody wins. This was one of those days. The PlayStation stayed with Michael. Martha got her $250, and somewhere in California, a little boy kept playing his video games, blissfully unaware of the mess his parents had made. So what's the moral of this sordid tale? When adults decide their pride is more important than their children's peace, everybody loses. When parents use their kids as weapons against each other, those kids grow up with scars that no court order can heal. William and Betty Sharp walked out of my courtroom that day thinking about who won and who lost. But I sat there thinking about Michael and whether he'd grow up to be a better person than his parents, despite everything they'd put him through. That's the real tragedy here. Not the PlayStation, not the $250, not even the cheating, the lying, or the arrests. The tragedy is that a little boy deserved better and his parents couldn't give it to him. And you know what? I've seen this story play out 1,000 times in 1,000 different ways. Different families, different issues, different amounts of money. But it always comes down to the same thing. Adults behaving badly while children pay the price. If you ever find yourself in a situation like William or Betty Sharp, if you're going through a divorce, a custody battle, or any kind of separation, do me a favor. Before you fight over the house, the car, the video games, or who gets the good china, stop for 1 second and ask yourself, what is this teaching my child? Because I promise you they're watching, they're learning, and they're remembering. Make it count.